policies of the United States have led to an acceleration of the movement towards digital sovereignty in Europe, and a widening of the public perception of the importance of this issue. But it's been going on for longer than that, as we're going to hear from our three distinguished panelists who will be addressing digital sovereignty in practice, but also in terms of policy as well. And I am convinced we're going to hear some interesting revelations over the next hour and 15 minutes or so. I have to say that unfortunately our fourth speaker, Nicole Beckendorf, who was going to talk about the experience of Schleswig-Holstein, the German land, which was one of the earliest political entities in Europe to move away from American dominance in the state of Schleswig-Holstein. She has fallen ill and is unable to join us, which we're very sorry about, but we will nonetheless try and compensate with our other equally brilliant panelists. I'm going to ask Cristina Cafara, who is a consultant, policy advisor, and co-founder of the Eurostack movement, most importantly for our purposes here, to take the podium first of all. She's going to give us a talk, and she will be followed by Olivier, our next panelist. Cristina.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Let me start correcting you. I'm not a consultant. I'm not a lobbyist. I'm not paid a cent for doing anything I do. Okay, it entirely comes out of a mission I feel very strongly about. My life as a consultant is over, thankfully. So I'm very grateful to be here. Thank you, Katia. This is an amazing room and an amazing event. I also listened with interest to the previous speaker. Professor Schneier is, of course, a leading light, and I agreed with most of what he said, or almost all of what he said, with an exception, which I think I will develop further in this discussion. He had the classic progressive American rose-tinted view of European regulation and was presenting a notion that in Europe, really, we have been a leading light in regulation, and we should continue to do so. My view is diametrically opposed to that, because I've lived European regulation from within the tent for the last 25 years, and I can say with great conviction that the result of that regulation has been a fat zero in all of this time. So let's get into the discussion of sovereignty, because again, I would like to make clear that what I'm going to talk about is not, in inverted commas, just AI. AI is, of course, the big discussion at the moment, but sovereignty as a vision does not limit itself in some sense to AI sovereignty. What concerns us is this stack, and the stack is a simplified notion that essentially embraces the vertical supply chain of assets that are necessary to produce digital output. And so AI itself ultimately is cloud, is software, is data. So these components are those that generate AI. But more generally, the stack goes from anything chips, hardware, software, connectivity, and products. So what I'm interested in, and what the sovereignty movement in the broad sense is interested in, is really this full supply chain. And I'm afraid that the reality that I think is sinking in, and what we are now beginning to appreciate, is that Europe is literally a digital colony. It is not something I say lightly, but it is a digital colony because 90% of our infrastructure is owned by non-Europeans. And I don't mean by that the apps and services that we use daily, the App Store, Google Search, or Amazon e-commerce, these B2C applications, which, again, our regulators in Europe sought vainly and vacuously to regulate for the past 15 years with zero result. I'm talking about indeed, that entire supply chain. And the reason this is essential, existential, is ultimately that Europe finds itself in a grave strategic predicament in which every layer of our digital life is essentially supported and deployed hardware, software, authorization, connectivity by players, operators we do not control and we do not own. And that is existential because it is foundational for our economic future, our industrial opportunities, the direction of our innovation, and certainly also our geopolitical leverage, right? So this is why this matters hugely. And the reason we in some sense are getting here, and the reason why I insist on this point is not our democracy and our values. Frankly, I don't give a damn about that kind of vision. There is a lot of discussion that we need to do this sovereignty because we need to preserve our European value and democracy. Look, I don't think we are particularly threatened, and that is not the main motivation for what I am arguing for. Nor is entirely the issue of resilience and security, which are very important in the discussion. We certainly need a degree of autonomy precisely to be able to have choice and resilience. The main motivation for what I'm arguing for is ultimately economic growth. Because if you think back about what Mario Draghi told us back in 2024, and then he doubled down when he went to Athens to get the Charlemagne Prize, Europe is in a very fragile economic predicament in which our own economic model, which is premised on export, open economy, is under threat. There is a serious concern about our capability to maintain this economic model going forward. We are absolutely pummeled by Chinese exports and bouncing off the American tariff wall. Our own ability to grow ultimately depends on our ability to capture value and invest. And if the entire infrastructure on which our life is based is owned by someone else, we are not capturing that value. Isn't that obvious? So when you have 90% of cloud infrastructure in Europe owned by non-Europeans, that means nearly 300 billion a year get whooshed out of European revenues to non-European suppliers, producers. That money doesn't get invested in European innovation and products. This is the foundation. When have we lost this basic economics 101 vision? You cannot build an economy on somebody else's infrastructure. It's out of the question. It's like saying you build an extension on somebody else's house. At some point, the owner of the house will say, nice extension you got there. Let me capture a little bit more value from you. So this is, again, simple but foundational. We will not be able to grow. Tech, digital is all-purpose technology that feeds into every sector of the economy. If we continue to be a colony in the way we are, across the board, from chips to hardware to software to connectivity and everything above, we will continue to remain weak and to limit our own capacity to grow. So here I come to the piece about regulation and why we got here. Look, I'm not against regulation per se, if it was possible, if it were possible to do things effectively and properly. My own history, my own journey, I was an antitrust and regulation expert for 20 years. I've been doing these things, and my considered judgment is that what has been achieved in that field is, as I said at the beginning, a fat zero. But the downside is not just that, because, okay, you do something, it doesn't work. There's been a lot of exertion for nothing. Okay. The real cost of that is being the fact that it has created an enormously big blind spot to what we should have been doing instead. Because what Europe has not done is build. For 15, 20 years, we told ourselves that if we tame big tech, then what? Explain to me the logic that goes, if I tame Google search, I build a cloud. If I tame the Apple App Store, I build a software industry for Europe. The two shall not meet. There is no relationship between the two. Have a Google search. I was involved, won't take lectures from anyone because I worked against Google search and Google in Texas and every state in the US as well as in the commission. So I know my chickens, as we say in Italy. But the point is, have at it. We failed, we didn't achieve anything, but it was fun while it lasted. The real issue is that there was a monorail mindset that somehow convinced us that if we try and control these giants, then again, what? Then what? And again, the words build were not there. We weren't considering. We were completely beyond and uninterested in the word build. Do you remember the bicep emojis that Margrethe Vestager was posting on Twitter? And Thierry Breton saying, we're taming them. Well, newsflash, you're not taming them. You don't care. You completely failed. This didn't go anywhere. So, and where was the build effort? So this blind spot is something that essentially has had a big cost for us. Another implication, and I'm diagnosing still, but there is a massive infantilization. There has been a massive infantilization of Europe as a result of this kind of vision, in which you talk to almost everyone in Europe, and the vision is, well, let's hope the Commission will do. The Commission should do that. The government should do that. Where have we lost any sense of agency and adulting as private sector, as actors? Look, I have no hope that the European Commission, well-intentioned as it is, can design the future of the European tech industry from a building in Brussels. DG Connect is full of lawyers and bureaucrats. They're very decent people, but they haven't a clue when it comes to actually designing what Europe should be doing. Why are we postponing and looking? Thank you. Why don't we have tech people and entrepreneur and capital allocators in the room making these discussions and decisions? No, we have this aspirational looking at mommy. Let's hope that mommy will cook me lunch. I mean, this isn't going to happen. Just simply not going to happen. And we diagnose the problem over and over again. At every event I go, there is, if only we had the single market, if only we had the capital markets union, then things would be great. Well, if my grandmother had wheels, that famous expression, we are not going to see any of that in our lifetime. You're not going to see a capital markets union. You're not going to see the single market. Get it, get over it, internalize it, live with it, and think about what else we can do. I continue to insist that I think much of this is to do with our own agency, our own ability as Europeans to effectively deploy what we have. Because the irony in all of this is that Europe has got incredible tech capabilities. We're not behind anyone. If you do what I do, which is travel from Stockholm to Copenhagen, to indeed Vienna, to Warsaw, to Munich, to Zurich, to Amsterdam, to Paris, etc. The tech ecosystems that we have in Europe are incredible. The talent, the capability. We have engineers, we have startups, we have innovators, we have entrepreneurs, we have people who are second to none. We have the money. We are richer than God in Europe. We have 1.4 trillion in savings as Europeans. We are a thrifty kind of continent. Americans save 0.7 trillion, half as much as we do. Of our 1.4 trillion, we send 300 billion every year to American VCs to fund American innovation. How can we be the only continent that struggles to grow and sends 300 billion every year to the United States for investment? It is unconscionable. And it is unconscionable because this money is around. It's not somewhere in ether. It is sitting in very, very tight pools at pension funds, at family offices, who invest in, guess what? What do they invest on? They invest in shipping, they invest in real estate, in bonds, and retirement homes. This is what our pension funds invest in, because of course we're all going to get old and die and we'll need a retirement home, and that's a steady stream of income. But what about investing somehow in our own tech, which is not risky? There is tons of scale up one can invest in. It is not riskier than anything. So for me, the thing that I really ultimately believe that sovereignty boils down to is forget the European Commission and the institutions. They're not going to make it happen for us. It is simply fact. When you see the European Commission issuing 2 weeks ago their much wanted sovereignty package, they've been at it for 2 years. They had one job, which was to write a sentence that said maybe perhaps governments could mandate that 20%, 30% of public spending in tech could be directed to European suppliers. This is what, I'm so sorry that Nicole isn't here, because this is what they've done spontaneously. The Commission could have driven things in the public sector to the right outcome. Did they do it? Hell no. Because, of course, hyperscalers and the American ambassador, or whatever he is, went in and said, nice cars you've got there. Wonder what happens if we increase tariffs. And so they lie on the floor. We know that Digitrade is a soft underbelly of the European Commission and will capitulate every time to threats. So this didn't happen. The Commission hasn't done anything. They produced another 300 pages of sovereignty package that says we will encourage, we will endeavor to, but it's going to do perfectly nothing. So let's get over that and look at who can actually do something. There are two types of actor that can do something, and we need to kick their ass to do something. One is the demand side. The supply is kind of there. Eurostat gathers 500 suppliers across the chain. Look, I'm not delusional. They're not perfect. They're not a one-on-one replacement for AWS or Microsoft, but you don't often need 400 functionalities from AWS for every single user case. There are many user cases where, in the same way as Professor Schneier said, we can be below, but it's still good enough. Banks don't need the kind of inference and compute that other kind of businesses need. So for many user cases, there are alternatives. It is not true they are more expensive or lower quality. This is hyperscaler propaganda. The facts are against that. So the supply needs to do its work, because of course it needs to coordinate and produce more integrated products that people want to buy. Got it. But the demand side, and I mean private demand, governments will do whatever they want or they feel like, because the Commission has basically chickened out and now it's up to individual member states. But the private demand needs to come out and play, because it's not good enough for the private demand to say, yeah, it's a little bit upsetting that we are so dependent and we should be less so. And then what are you buying, Microsoft? I mean, come on. This is not serious. You need to just evaluate alternatives. Final point, I mentioned capital. I think the good news is that capital is beginning to wake up, private capital, and fluidify somewhat. I see it in various ways. A number of family offices and pension funds beginning to say, we think that there are opportunities for investment in European tech, and I think maybe something is moving. But that is the only realistic option. No one else is going to do it for us. And final point, let's abandon all of this rhetoric that somehow we're a middle power. When that was said at Davos by Mark Carney, I got furious, because he tries to rope us into a view that we are somehow a middle power. Forget it. Forget that. We are a superpower as Europe, and we need to act like one. Thank you.
Well, after that exceptionally bracing start to this panel, which gives us, I think, a very good big picture idea of where we are and what the challenges are, it's my pleasure now to invite Olivier Deltay who is from the Direction interministérielle du numérique d'Annon in Paris, I believe, or France. Paris, France, who has been responsible for European programs and partnerships at Danone, and there are really exciting and interesting things happening in France in terms of software dependency, hardware dependency, and Olivier, you and your slides are going to explain to us, I hope, a bit of what's been going on.
Thank you. So thanks, Misha. What I would like to share with you this morning is a story. In fact, it's two stories. But what I would just after what Christina explained previously about the big picture, about what's happening today, I would like to a bit deep dive into what we are doing today, dealing with different type of partners at a European level, and also to explain with what's happening today on the ground with real people doing real things, and crafting real tools for cross-border usage. And yes, is that it? Sorry. And what I would like to share with you is what we've been doing for almost 3 years now with some European partners, and it took its roots in another initiative we had in France to empower the public servants, public agents, to develop their from scratch new digital services. We call this initiative bida.go.fr. And it's mostly a lean approach that is given to a public servant to develop within their at any level of the administration, public administration. That means in the ministry, in a municipality, wherever. There are some services, public services, digital public services that are useful to them, of course, and also to the citizen, as Christina said previously. So it started years ago, and as someone said yesterday, we have to think that on the long run. We won't be able to say, oh, we're going to be sovereign and it's going to be sovereign in steps. It's not possible. So we started with that initiative in order to give people the tools to be more, to have some, to offer some alternatives to what they were using at that moment, and also to change a bit the way they are thinking about technology, using technology on a daily basis. So what we learned out of this first experiment is that it's mostly enables bottom-up innovations within the public administration, which was at that time very, very important to us, and also acculturates very broadly the public servants, public agents at different level. A few years ago, in 2023, we had many digital public services. Of course, mostly all of them were built on open source code, and we understood that these tools were used, of course, in French public administration, but could be also used in other public administration around Europe. And we started to find how we could co-develop or co-create new tools, not only at a national level, but at a European level. And meaning that when you co-develop it's just not to put some code somewhere and say, hey, here is the code, please use it. It's to gather people, a different type of people, as Christina said previously, around the table to co-develop these tools and to organize it in a way anyone can learn out of it. So first we had to find some partners, meaning some public administrations or different type of partners, not only administrations, but different type of partner that could participate, who have the same needs and could participate to this co-development. Also to identify not only EU funding, but different types of funding for that. And find also people, and it relates very precisely with the building of a community of players, to find people that are, of course, are able to co-develop these tools, but also to maintain it, because when it's about open source, you can't just put the code somewhere. You also have to find people that can maintain it. It's another key thinking we had at that time. So, and of course, promote these initiatives around these different type of communities, not only giving a promotion through different type of networks, but also to bring people or to embark these different type of people through the creation of co-development of these tools. So once we have said that, we say, okay, let's co-develop these tools, but I can give you it's not that easy. And why is it's not that easy? Because we have different culture in different organizations. Let's say that just in public administration in these different countries, when we start to work with the German public administration and then the Netherlands public administration, we understood that we had different type of organization. In France, we are an agency, a public agency, but in Germany, that's the Minister of Interior who had in their hands the digitization of the public administration. In the Netherlands, it's a mix at different level of the states. So we have different culture. We have different not only administrative culture, but also IT culture, or different way to think the IT supply chain. So we had to also to find a way to be on the same page, to work together. But even if it was not that easy, we started 3 years ago, and we finally found some ways to co-develop these tools. So I talked about 2 different stories. The first one is this is about setting up or building new types of workplace tools for public servants. And we called it this initiative 100-Day Challenge, because in a few days we would like to gather all the people involved in the development of, let's say, some building blocks for the workplace. I don't know, a text editor, a video conference tool, and so on and so forth. And to gather these people, not only developers, designers, policy officers, project managers, and so on. And we gather all these people first through projectathon or hackathons. You put all the people in one room and work together for 2 days. And we did that with at least at the beginning with 3 countries and other invited countries for a big one we did last year. And we had 4 challenges, meaning we had 4 building blocks where we knew that at least the 3 countries would like to develop at the same time. So we ended up with improvements in these building blocks, we created these new building blocks with partners within the 3 countries. and we did ship real code, real tools that are used by public administration within these 3 countries. Following that initiative, what happened is that through discussion with the European Commission, we finally set up a consortium where any member state, any organization here within the EU is invited. We started with 4 countries: Italy, Germany, Netherlands, France, and Luxembourg. And the idea behind it is, through this consortium, is to facilitate the access to, of course, to funding, but also to facilitate the access to maintainers, to the different building blocks I was talking about, and finally to find ways to make communities out of the different participants within the full supply chain of IT supply chain for let's say open source and digital commons. So let's go to one example within the different challenges. One of the challenges was about a text editor called Docs, which first was built on a building block brought by a Dutch developer, and we would like to make it, let's say, usable by different administration within France, Germany, and the Netherlands. And we add at the end some users within the 3 countries of this tool. And the good thing that is, instead of having 3 different text editors in that 3 countries, built upon code that was not exactly the same, even it was for the same purpose. We have one single code at one place, but can be reused by any other member state, but it's been used in the first place by these 3 member states. So that's kind of a success. Just giving you an example of this tool. It's much more simpler than any other text editor or let's say on the market, but we know that it answers the needs on the daily basis for any public servants who deals with text. So here are some examples where the interface is also in many languages, and you can cooperate, you can collaborate on the same documents at the same time. You have also that offer on different type of platform, but this one is built upon open source code and can be reused by anyone. So this tool is part of let's say a set of tools, which is called in France La Suite, but it's has another name in Germany or in the Netherlands. But just to give you a hint of what's happening here, we are giving to any public servant in France the opportunity to have, let's say, an alternative to what they are using today. Let's say to mainly, as it's been said previously, to what's been used at almost 90% within public administration is brought by big tech. So this is an alternative. They can use it or not, but they have now the choice. And through this, the initiative I talked about with that 4 other member states, we did set up a few months ago what we call an EDIC. This is an EC vehicle, which is I spoke about the mission of this EDIC, and you can see at the bottom of the page of the screen that first one of the main mission of this EDIC is to set up a European community of players. I mean, who wants to build upon open source code some different tools, not only about the workplace, because it was the first challenge we did, but on any topic that could be useful for any public administration in Europe in the first place, but also for citizens. Yes, I would like also to tell another story, because we're also involved in a consortium which is called GovTech for All. Still, it targets the public servants, but here we have, as you can see, more than 15 partners from 11 member states. So here again, it's to experiment, to develop. It's kind of incubator. We can experiment and develop new tools and cooperation between different type of players in the IT sphere, and we are working with different member states. I mean, of course, again the Netherlands, but also Spain, Greece, on initiative around rules as code, how you can translate the law into code and tools for the citizens. And it's been working pretty well, because we're going to enter a third round of this initiative next year. We started it with only 2 pilots, let's say MVP, and we are next year we'll go with at least 6 or 7 different pilots with at least 4 to 5 different member states for each of them. So that's very important to know as well. So what's also this initiative demonstrates, it's what we develop can be, of course, reusable by anyone. So it also shows that there is a strong benefit of the work between, let's say, different type of organization, NGO, startups, and administrations, and public administrations. And also we have that. Yes,
I'm going to ask you to wind up, Olivier.
Yes. Sorry,
so that we can get to the.
Just in a few words. So what we can see that with these two stories, that is that bottom up is very important, because we started with people working on practical tools, and now these tools are used by more and more public administration around Europe, and also the way the other idea here that could be also shared is that we also have the permission, like any startup, to pivot within that. Through this initiative, we had the opportunity to start on one MVP and then change to something else. So it was really, really important to, in a way, to change the culture and to move people, to acculturate people to this new environment, this new ecosystem, through the crafting of these new tools and these new, let's say, challenges.
Thank you, Olivier. Thank you. And now
we can have some discussion. There's much to disagree with.
I know. We're going to have a discussion, Christina. But before we do, I'd call on Nicholas Stocker, who is a system engineer at the Cybersecurity Center of the Austrian Armed Forces. But more importantly for this panel, he is the deputy lead managing the migration of over 15,000 employees of the Austrian Army, the Bundesheer, to the open source office suite Libra office. Nicholas, can you tell us where you are with that project and how it's going?
Yeah, sure. Maybe let's start a little bit with telling you all about how this migration came to be, the necessity behind it. So it all started in 2020 around, when the trend to going up to the cloud. Cloud developing became stronger and stronger. And we were using Microsoft Office 2016. And every few years we have license negotiations with Microsoft to see, okay, how can we go into the future, what's necessary. And the maintenance for the 2016 version of Microsoft Office was running out in 2024. And one of the most important questions that we asked that day was, will there be another on-premises, offline-based Microsoft Office in the future? And even back in 2020, they told us, we can't promise you anything. Everything goes to the cloud, the developing goes to the cloud. So we can't promise you that there will be an Microsoft Office that you can run on your own systems without any need of an external cloud. And even then, we asked, okay, even if we would use the cloud, what influence can you have? And they said, even back then, if the US government orders us to give information from your server or from the servers, we are legally bound to give them, even without telling you guys that we did. So that was the first alarm bell that rang. We said, okay, we need to do something. We need to change something, because we as the Austrian Armed Forces are responsible for the citizens, for our people, and we need to, first of all, keep our data secure. We need to have everything in our hands. And as we say at our institution, we need to work when nothing works anymore. And therefore, it was clear that we needed to make changes to go into the right direction. And after a few months of researching, looking for the best alternatives, we got to LibreOffice, as it has the most features, and at the time it has the biggest community and the best economics behind it, in terms of there were a lot of companies that have the availability and the functionality to develop the product and to make it better. So in 2022, we started the progress of migration. And if I tell you, the migration process in implementing the product in our systems was the easy part. The most complex and most challenging part of this migration was the users. Because as you might think, especially with Microsoft Office, we get it from a little age. We get it in school. We learn to use Word. We learn to use Excel. We learn to use PowerPoint. Everything works automatically. You don't have to think where the button is. And even if LibreOffice is a quality product that even we're not working for LibreOffice, so I can say Microsoft Office is a really great product. It has almost everything you want. And even if you take this step to another product and the button is 3 centimeters to the right, you're confused. You take everything takes longer. It's the most regular response that we get from our users. First of, if I made this before, I needed 30 minutes. Now I need 2 hours because I don't know where everything is. So you need to convince the users that this is necessary, and it was necessary for us. It was not an option to improve digital sovereignty. It was the only option that existed, because we need to be sovereign in this sense and in every other sense as well. So there needs to be an understanding for the users to make them understand and make them recognize the importance, so they jump on board and take those little inconveniences as a necessary evil and not as something that we do to make their work make longer or make their work harder. Especially in the government setting, the first argument we will often hear is, you do that because it's cheaper. Now, we didn't do that because it was cheaper. We did it because it was necessary. And that's like the most important thing you need to tell and tell and tell and tell, so the users understand that. Now, after a couple of years, we're at the stage where the communications in our organization is purely based on LibreOffice and open source, but we are only halfway there yet. So around 80% of our licenses were reduced, but there is 20% left. And what's that 20%? First of all, it's the communication with external partners. A lot of firms, a lot of companies only use Microsoft Office. And especially if you have to work together with another firm to make some document to work together on an article or a science-based document, it only works if you use the same product. Another thing is macro programs. So programs inside of Excel or Word or Access. It's a blessing and a curse at the same time because they work too well. The most common theme is that there is some really great user, really great worker that gets that stuff, that develops a program that automizes important tasks and makes life easier for everyone. Great. Or it's an intern or something that has the time to do that. 20 years later, the person is gone. It either is went to another company, is in pension, or the intern is already left, and now nobody knows how the program works, but everybody needs it. Everybody depends on it. Now you get to another system, and the program doesn't work anymore because the macros are not compatible. Now everybody says, oh, we can't do our work. We have basically forgotten how we did it before. And so that's the second big thing where we say, okay, we need some licenses because of those programs. So now with the step is the normal things work and they work really great. But the next steps is to reduce those macro programs, to build solutions within from our professional developers on databases, on web, whatever is necessary to make them on a centralized way, because that's another thing. The users, they develop what they need. For example, time management, time tracking, when do you come, when do you go? Before we make the change, we had like 50 different programs, macro programs that track time, because every I don't get the word right. Every department made their own version. Now we have a centralized solution that everybody can manage, and it's much cleaner. And we need to find a way to communicate with external firms, but on our basis. Currently, we try to make some kind of infrastructure that we can invite other firms so that they can work from our basis, and we are not forced to their programs, to their needs. One thing that's also very, very important is, especially when you talk about acceptance, is that it's not always only bad things. You need to find some positives. You need to find something that exceeds what has been before. For us, for example, because we only use the offline version of Microsoft 2016, there was no possibility to work together with another person on the same document at the same time, like you can with Office 365 or Google Docs. Now we are using CollaboraOffice, which is an online version of LibreOffice. It gives us this ability to really work simultaneously together and have this kind of functionality that hasn't been there before. And yeah.
Nicholas, that's really great. I want to open it up to have a bit more of a discussion, but there's something that you said that was very important that relates back to what Christina was saying. Now, Christina, I know you want to come back on some of the things Olivia was saying, but it seems to me there's a key issue here. You talked about supply and demand. At the moment, the demand for European products in the digital world is primarily coming from governments. And one of the things that Nicholas said, which I thought was absolutely critical, is that it's very difficult for users to switch over from familiar American products to the European products out there. So the question is how do you get businesses, corporations, and individuals? Is there a way of creating a demand there for European products, given that what you say, the supply side is ready and waiting to go?
Is it a question to me?
It's a question for you, yes. This panel is mainly talking about government initiatives apart from me, and I completely understand what Nicholas says and support it. Of course, for the defense purposes, it is essential to create an alternative which works when nothing else does. And that is motivation number one. You get my vote. When it comes to other initiatives that are supported by the state, look, fine, you're not going to move the dial. You're not going to create much demand. In France, and I admire France, France is a great country because it has been a pioneer in these things. And we really need to recognize that France, in terms of digital sovereignty, has been shouting from the rooftops for years. And this is something which I warrant. There is too much of a view that somehow the state can do something. Building software inside the government isn't what I think people should be doing. This is a big dispute in France between the government and the software private sector, because the view is that DigHum shouldn't be building software. It should be the private sector that does, and DigHum shouldn't compete with the private sector. But that's a sort of their fight, and I don't want to go into that. More important to me, and I'll get to your question in a moment, Misha. Look, do not get bamboozled into the view that stuff is really happening. Stuff isn't happening. It is nice that edicts are created. What is an edict? It's a group of countries with a few million sprinkled on top that meet and do a few things. They're useful, but they're not going to move the dial in a material way. They're creating some sort of mood music. Jolly good. This is the same as when the European Commission eventually assigned a contract for 180 million for its own purposes to a consortium of three European consortia. And this came because we absolutely drummed the drum from the hill and said, in what world does the European Commission spend taxpayer money on Microsoft? And eventually they relented and did it. And that has got some signaling value. In the same way as this edict, you want to meet in nice locations and have discussions with civil society and think tanks, have at it. Civil society and think tanks and academics don't matter for the real world. So the issue is, where is the private sector? Where is the demand from the private sector? This is the question. So we can have the state and the government shifting a bit. Public sector demand in Europe is 20% of the total. If you shift a bit of that, maybe 5-10% of demand can shift to non-European, non-American products. It's not going to move the dial for European supply. What you need is a significant shift. And what is holding back the private sector? Why aren't the Nokia, the Ericsson, the SAP, the Bosch, the Siemens coming out and saying proudly, we are Europeans and we are supporting Europe, and we are buying European goods? They're not. Why aren't the Mercedes, the Volkswagen, and so on? They're not. Why are they still buying AWS and Microsoft? Now, grant that for certain user cases where you need a lot of computing inference, there isn't a complete European alternative. I get that. But for a lot of what banks need to do, retailers need to do, businesses need to do, things are there. And the reality is there is an amount of inertia and laziness, capture, because, of course, you never get fired for buying Microsoft.
The system integrators in our world are the Capgemini. Let's name names. The Capgemini, the Gartner, the ISG, they only recommend hyperscalers because they get a cut of the revenue. And so this is where we are, unless we cut this Gordian knot. And I don't see another answer but to just kick their ass continually and saying, why are you making this decision? I see some shift, I see some changes, and you know, we are on a cusp. But unless European demand moves, we are knitting socks. We are just knitting socks, all of us, edicts, non-edicts, government, and whatever. Nice.
So the question is how do you cut that Gordian knot? How do you persuade people to go over to other systems?
Well, the narrative that tends to be used is the one of security and resilience. And unless, frankly, Donald Trump does something again on Greenland or something sort of extravagant, people kind of all hope that, yeah, you know, with the midterm, it's all going to go back to normal. And with the next election, we get a normal person and then everything is okay. So boards are very cautious. But there is also some change, and I see it when talking to boards because the resistance is at the IT department level. The IT department boards say we should change, and then when this decision goes to the IT department, they always get not possible. Not possible. Why? It is possible. Just work a bit harder. You know, I'll give you just this example, and I was on a panel at the, hate to name names, but I was at the Technical University in Munich. The factory of future engineers in Europe. 300 kids in the audience, engineers. And I was next to the CTO of the university. And so I said to him, so what do you get for the university? And he said, Microsoft. I said, oh, okay, that's interesting. Why is that? And he said, because it's free. So I said, look, you know, we know that's the playbook. We know that's the playbook of Microsoft. They give things away to schools and universities. Shouldn't you be better than this? And he was like, it's hard to beat free. There was an uproar. The students were standing up and saying, this is unacceptable to us. We do not want our future to be this Europe. We want Europe to be bolder and prouder. And it was shocking to him. And in the end, don't take a leaf out of this book, but I went back to Eurostack and said, the guy said he gets Microsoft because he's free. And then Proton, who is one of my companies, said, tell him I'll match, see what he says. So, you know, you need to just look around and you need to wake up because the choices exist. Just get off your ass and do something. That's the point.
Thank you, Christina. Olivier, Christina did acknowledge there that France has been a pioneer in all of this. But, I mean, do you think that there is a broader value in terms of image projection when a country like France shifts huge amounts of its public sector over to European? It gets rid of Zoom. It's now cancelling Palantir's contract. I mean, this surely has also a major impact in terms of the way that people perceive digital sovereignty.
Yes, and to build upon what Christina just said, in France, there is it's not a law, but there is a text by the government saying that for any public administration in France today, if they are using an instant messaging tool, they have to use this instant messaging tool based on open source, which is based on metrics. So in that way, government can help to make the change. By example, saying, okay, please use that tool, not this one. So it's on the way. It's not for all the tools available on the market, but it's on the way.
Nicholas, one of the things that fascinates me about this is what you said, that Microsoft informed the Austrian army that the United States government can access the data that your systems were using with Microsoft without telling the Austrian army. Have you discussed this with other militaries in Europe, or is Austria an outlier because you are, of course, permanently neutral?
So, um, first of all, the accessibility of the data is when using the cloud-based services, and
Which is a lot of the time.
which is a lot of the time. And of course, we share our stories. So when we first started talking about this migration at last year at the LibreOffice conference, we first talked about it. We had a lot of questions from other militaries, from the educational sector, from other government organizations and even private companies that wanted to know, how did you do it? How did you do it? What are the information that we would need to consider when making this step? So I do think there is something that's going on. There is some kind of wave that is climbing, but it needs time. We needed 4 years to make this first step. It's not something that can happen overnight. And we also said we don't want to talk about it before it's finished, before we can say we have done it. And when you take a look at Munich, for example, who tried to migrate and then fell back, and
You mean the city of Munich?
yeah, the city of Munich.
Station.
Yes. So it's
What happened with Munich?
so they migrated to open source Microsoft Office alternative. I think they call it something like Munich Office or something like that. And then they were happy, I think, for like 2 years. But then there was a government shift, and it was decided that they shall use Microsoft Office again. And they had a completely different user experience where they said, all right, we now know this new product. We don't want to change. We don't know how Microsoft Office works. So it's just an experience thing that you need to, if you have something you're comfortable with it, change is always difficult.
Christina, I want to tell. I get that if you were to persuade, say, Mercedes or Volkswagen or one of the other major European countries to go over to European products, you would at some point reach a tipping point in terms of industry where people see the value in this. Can I ask you about the other sector, which is the consumer sector, which is all of us? I was thinking when I was at the IWM, the institute that I was rector of here, I was thinking of turning the IWM over to LibreOffice. And I started investigating it myself, and I realized that with our resources, which were pretty limited for an academic research institute, with our resources, we just didn't have the resources to switch over to LibreOffice. Now, as an individual user, I might now explore that again, but you have to have a certain degree of competence in technical competence in order to do this, but B, you have to see some value if you're an individual consumer user. Is there a way of creating an education program, a campaign to get people to start considering switching?
So the sovereignty movement is really mostly B2B, because what we need to happen is that businesses that account for the bulk of the purchase of these services shift over. That said, public opinion matters. And there are surveys after surveys and polls after polls that are coming out right now saying that European citizens have shifted massively their preferences in the direction of, we understand we need more own capabilities. We support European solutions. And there was a poll that came out yesterday that said, even if it were to be more expensive, we would support it. So public opinion is there, getting there already. 70-80% of public opinion already think that. Depends on the states. The member states vary in that sense. The Nordics are Atlanticists, the French are much more ahead. But on average, there is a shift. And so that is supportive of change. And I think that, it's not the private individual who's got to make this choice, it's companies. And companies are equipped, technically. They're not ill-equipped. They have CTOs, CIOs. They have, at the very least, some sort of technical capabilities capable to make these choices. I mean, I'm not worried about the capabilities of Europeans to evaluate and assess and make the change. We're not babes in the wood. We know, there are the people there in the companies to make these decisions. The problem is they're captured. They are reluctant. They think that it might be risky. And there is a collective action problem, because if you are the only bank, I had a conversation with somebody who is in a bank in Austria, and she was saying, yeah, I'd like to switch, but what if I'm the only one in the banking sector in Austria to switch, and then there is some sort of downside for me, risk and cost. So, okay, but I mean, it isn't as we've never met this kind of problem in history. It is a classic collective action problem. So there are solutions. One can create bias clubs. One can create collective buying. You're buying cloud. And for many users, it's fairly commoditized. Get the banks together to procure cloud. It's not beyond the will of man. Think of solutions. If the banks in Austria got together and say, we put together an RFP, we need so much cloud, and we need it with these specs, yeah, they can do it. Yeah, there would be a great response. And if you say we'd rather have suppliers from Europe, there would be a response. There would be at least 6 or 7 people bidding for that contract. So what's stopping us? This is the question. What is stopping us? Let's not listen to excuses all the time.
Just out of interest, have you come across resistance from the government of Ireland, whose economy is so dependent on servicing U.S. digital companies?
There's a diverse position in Europe. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. On the forefront are the French. The Germans have come along in a very reluctant way, but they're now alongside. And then there is certainly the Netherlands are quite powerful. Others, the Nordics are very reluctant because historically they regarded themselves as total Atlanticists. They're just an appendage of the US. They don't want to upset the Americans in any way.
Well, except Denmark here is...
Denmark is a bit of an exception, but in reality they're not doing that much. And then Italy is missing in action. Spain is missing in action. So, there's a bit of...
Olivier, I wanted to come...
Maybe at some point, because we have some discussion with Denmark and Norway to participate to a pilot around super apps, if you know the concept of super app. So we had some talks weeks ago with Ukraine, which is one of the best user of crafter of super apps. And we through one of the consortia to gather other member states to work on and some Nordic countries are keen to participate. So that could be a way to enter the game.
A way to do it. I want to take some questions for the audience in the last few minutes. We've got a lady here who I saw very... Do we have a mic at all? Yeah, we've got a mic. Just coming. Super, thank you very much.
Thanks so much. I'll keep it brief. So with the tokenization of AI looming on the horizon, society is on the verge of splitting between the AI haves and the AI have-nots, right? So I'm thinking further down the road as a model for Europe, AI seems to shift from a consumer app more and more to an infrastructure problem, like it is an infrastructure like the power grid. What do you think of the idea of like a sovereign wealth fund, much like oil in for the Norwegian region?
Well, I think it's a splendid idea, and there's been an idea about a CERN for AI going around for some time. If we can get it together and pool the resources, I'm all in favor of it. But, I'm quoted in Tagesspiegel this morning saying the best thing the European Commission could do is give a bag of 200 billion to AI builders in a room and leave the room. Leave the room is the most important thing. Give the money to the builders and go get a coffee and let other people do something. So, I think, of course, but there is also, this narrative about the have and have-nots is turning into something quite sinister. Because, of course, you realize that there is an absolute propaganda battle at the very moment by the proxies for American tech, who are into terror and fear, and are telling us it's really scary for us. They're Europeans. This is what's really, really upsetting. They're Europeans, and they write of us to us. We really need to be careful, because unless we have access to these models, civilization will be over. And we need to beg American tech companies to build more infrastructure in our country in exchange for having them promise to give us more compute. And it's like, what? This is again the propaganda of fear. Europe has gone many other alternatives, many other choices. Don't fall. I mean, this is what Professor Shire was saying this morning. Architectures are there, are being experimented on. Let's not fall for that. We are going to not build, Anthropic. Okay, fine. So if we can build something that is somewhat below, I'm all for it. But I don't know who is going to do it and where the energy is coming from. Steve? Yeah.
I'm going to take another question now.
Hi, this is a question to Mr. Stocker. Misha wanted to know if you were in contact with other militaries, but what I'd be interested is, are you in contact with other ministries in Austria? Are you in contact with your suppliers, the arms industry, people like that, about the problem you were describing to us? And how are they handling it?
Yeah. We are willing to talk to everyone who wants to talk to us. So especially in Austria, we are in regular talks with the Ministry of Justice. They already switched to LibreOffice a few months ago and they work with it a lot of years. And even in the Innenministerium,
The Interior Ministry.
In the Interior Ministry, there's a small department called the Staatendokumentation, and they work on LibreOffice and even Linux only. So those are the ones that we regularly talk about, but there's always talks in the CTO areas, regions between the ministries, and we try to give our experience, try to help where we can, and make and change as easiest as possible for other ministries to make them have an easier time if they want to.
Thank you. Another question there.
Okay, thank you for this nice discussion. I'm very interested in digital sovereignty. I'm a teacher in Amsterdam at the Vrije Universiteit Amsterdam, and I teach my students about, let's say, digital colonies in Africa. That's basically our research. So we say that Africa is a digital colony. So we use also the Eurostack. So your report, I read it. It's very interesting to see that the Eurostack have from, let's say, mineral resources to the top, to AI and everything in between, software, the cloud, networks are, let's say, US first and China second, and then Europe comes just very far below. So of course Europe sees themselves as a digital colony. But how, if you want, let's say, to change that, to fight the digital colonialism from a European perspective, and then we take, let's say, the digital humanism perspective, how do we make sure that becoming the superpower again, the digital superpower, as you said, Christina, that will not, let's say, have as a consequence that we are colonizing other parts of the world, and we look at mineral resources that we need for this digital, let's say, superpower. We think at the environment and everything that comes with it. So how do we make sure that it is, let's say, that we abide to the digital humanism principles?
So when I talk about Europe as a superpower, I don't mean that we are a digital superpower, nor that we'll ever be. I mean that we are an economic superpower. We are an economic superpower. We have the resources to invest, to develop, to do what it takes. So I I sense that behind your question there is a vision that says, what if Europe is to become really dominant in tech and then imposes that view on other continents? Look, we are nowhere near that. The Europeans are small, fragmented, and all we can aspire to is to reverse that trend and create more space for ourselves. Sovereignty is not, the sovereignty movement is not about creating a European Microsoft or a Google. We don't need that. We won't have that. We will not ever create that. It is about essentially powering up what is our fundamental structure, which is, yes, diverse, fragmented, has national components. That's all okay. It's a feature, not a bug. We are not going to create a single massive European supergiant, which we are going to, or even 2 or 3. We are so far away from that. Our players are tiny. And even with all the effort in the world, they will become less tiny and perhaps decent and perhaps less negligible. And that is already progress, because at current rates, we are looking at extinction. So in a world in which the alternative is extinction, I think that getting to 20% of my market is super cool. But it ain't going to be one thing that is going to impose itself on the world. We are so far off. I mean, we really need to reverse the trend and assert ourselves, but we're not going to colonize anyone credibly.
Briefly, we've got Olivia, did you want to come in on that?
No.
No. We've got time for 2 more questions. One is microphone ready, and then generally, we'll take both questions at once.
You complained that, I think I remember, $300 billion investment go to American VC, and they're not going to European venture capital. But the people who invest this money are investors. They're not ideologues. So I'm guessing they're making this decision based on financial calculations. So unless we change the financial equations here, why would you start investing? You know, obviously they are thinking that investing in the US is a better deal than investing in Europe.
Well, let's all
What do we do to change that?
Yeah, I'll take the second question as well, and then Christina, you come straight back on the...
Okay, so first of all, thanks to all the panelists in the chair for this very nice panel. My question is to Christina. I much appreciated your picture about the current situation of the digital system in Europe. And now my question is, given that 40 years of European research program and European industrial strategy in information technology has produced this scenario where most of our infrastructure are controlled outside Europe. And given that in Brussels, we have many institutions that are full of bureaucrats that do not really understand why we as member states are continue sending all that money to Brussels. Shouldn't we better invest as member states in our own companies or bilateral or trilateral cooperations that could provide better value to Europe?
So, I mean...
So the 2 questions.
Yeah. I will take the first. I mean, of course, there is an economic calculation, and we know historically there has been a vision that American tech generates better returns. That's a fact, and that's why the money has been going there. But it isn't something which is unchangeable or persists now. There was an article in the Financial Times 2 weeks ago saying sovereignty may not be fully achievable, but it is currently good investment. So returns for investment in European tech, and that's across the stack, are decent. We're not looking at the 30-40% that you're looking for if you are a VC looking for a unicorn, but we're looking at decent returns, and certainly, you know, something that compares to a bond or a real estate. So, you know, I obviously recognize that VCs need to make an economic calculation, and the funders need to make an economic calculation around returns. But what I'm observing is that there is a much increased appetite, and I see it in family offices in other places for now experimenting with European tech. The returns are not minus 10%. The returns are positive and growing. So I think we will see some developments there. I'm hopeful. I couldn't agree more. You know, to be fair to the European Commission, they got an impossible mission, which is they operate by consensus. They have 27 member states, and as we know, they go at the speed of the slowest. And that compounds honestly a problem of competencies, because you do not have the right people in place. That's a fact. The people in the bureaucracy are not technically competent, they've got no entrepreneurial capability. And so, they'll do what they can, but it is very limited in my view. So why do we keep sending this money to Brussels? A very good question. Can the member states do? I think that Brussels at this point is set up to fail. I do not think that anything useful is going to come out of them. So I would encourage everyone to say, guess what? I'm going to just club with my friends over here and do something else independently of you. I was yesterday in conversation with somebody from the European Commission. And listen just to this. Somebody from the European Commission was asking me about what they were planning to do, which was send an invitation to a select group of CEOs to come into Brussels and meet some startups, okay? And they were saying, we are writing the invitation letter, wanted to check it with you, how does it sound to you? First paragraph said, to the CEOs, you will have the benefit of coming to Brussels, meeting von der Leyen and mingling with Commission officials. So I said, are you serious? If this letter goes out to Follow the Money or any of the publications, you are inviting openly CEOs to come in to lobby you. This is the game. CEOs go in to lobby. They don't do anything. Look at the 6 CEOs of the largest European companies, Nokia, Ericsson, Bosch, Siemens, ASML, and by the way, throwing Mistral. They went to have dinner with von der Leyen 3 weeks ago. And they all go and take selfies. Because that's what you do. Now you have the selfie and she's in the middle and then the men are arranged in height like at school. And then they give, the next day, they give they produce a press release. And the press release says, we are the 6 CEOs of the largest European businesses. We account for 420 billion euros in revenue, 1 trillion in assets, market cap, and 1 million employees. And you say, okay, good. What are you going to say next? Warm up. Are you going to say, and we are going to pledge 200 billion now in investment in European infrastructure? Oh no, they said we had a lovely dinner with the president and we told her she should deregulate more. So another lobby bullshit. So, I'm saying this because the European enterprise is also guilty of not doing enough. But, we're all in this together. Unless things start moving in the right direction, what can we say? But yes, I agree with you. The Commission isn't going to do it for us. Forget it.
It's an iron law that one should never keep a conference from its lunch. And so it's time to wind up. But this subject is going to be more and more important over the next few years. So it's well worth keeping track of. But in the meanwhile, can you join me in thanking Christina, Olivier, and Nicolas for giving us a really solid introduction?
Thank you.